Now what we're going to do is we are going to make a coil. And now for this project, we can make all different kinds of coil, but we always want to start out with a basic long coil. To do that, I need to have wedged clay. I've already taken the time to wedge this clay. When you're making coils, it is super important to keep your clay wet, okay? You're gonna see as you start to make coils that if you don't wet it enough, when you're rolling the coil, they'll crack and they'll break, and that can be really frustrating, as well as when you're bending the coils into other types of coils, things will break a lot more easily if they are not properly wet. And so I've wedged my clay. I don't need all of this to make one coil. I just want to pull off just a little bit to start. Probably just enough to fit into the palm of my hand. And then I want to take this and I want to put it back in my bag. I want to keep this in my bag. I don't want it sitting out on the table. If it's sitting out on the table, it's going to dry and it's going to cause you more issues later. So I'm going to tuck that back into my bag to make sure that it stays nice and wet. Okay, so now that I have my piece of clay that's about the size of my palm, I'm going to squeeze it into a hot dog. Now, I know that we've already done some coil making, mostly to attach pieces of clay to other pieces of clay. For example, when we attach the walls of our boxes or our houses, we joined the walls together for support with a coil. Once I squeeze this into a hot dog, I want to set it down on the table and I want to roll it from the tips of my fingers all the way to my wrist. The tips of my fingers all the way to my wrist. I'm actually letting it touch my wrist as I roll, okay? The reason I'm doing this is because I need the clay to create a full rotation, okay? If I only do this, then the clay is only rolling back and forth on itself. But if I go all the way from the tips of my fingers to my wrist, it makes a complete rotation. This will make sure that the clay stays round, okay? So I'm going to roll it underneath my hand to round it off. And then once I do that, I'm ready to start changing the length of the clay. I have my fingertips, I'm rolling all the way to my wrists, and then as I roll back, I'm moving my hands outward. And I'm gonna move my hands back in, and then I'm gonna move my hands outward, and then I'll move my hands back in, and I'll do this over and over again. It will start to get thinner on the edges and a little thicker in the middle. Where it's thicker, I wanna focus more of my hands. So if it's thicker, I don't want to move my hands out too far, okay? I want to focus my hands right where it's thicker. Now, I'm going to bring this up to the camera because I want you to see the cracks. Do you guys see the cracks? That means that I need to add water. I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm going to give it a really good spray. Now I've added quite a bit of water. It's sitting in its own puddle of water. That's okay. What we want to do is we want to let the clay absorb that water. Once it's not glistening anymore, it's not shiny from the water, then I can continue to roll my coil and make it thinner. The ideal coil diameter for this project is about 1/2 inch. But you don't want to go any bigger than 1/2 inch. So I'm letting the coil absorb that water. And then when it absorbs a good amount of that water, I'm gonna roll it back and forth in the wet area on the table. If I try to roll it now, while it's still wet, it's gonna roll all over the place. It's gonna be slippery and slimy. And we don't necessarily want that. We wanna have control over the coil that we are making, so that way we can make a really even and consistent coil. All right, at this point, the clay has absorbed majority of the water, and so I'm going to continue to roll. And I am focusing on the areas that are thicker to maintain the same thickness all the way down the coil. I'm just gonna move my hands around wherever I see that it's thicker. And again, tips of my fingers all the way to my wrist. Tips of my fingers all the way to my wrist. So I'm gonna go a little bit more. And look how big this coil is. It's a big coil, okay? With just that little chunk of clay from the palm of my hand. All right, so this is about a 1/2 inch thick. And so what I can do is I can grab my cone once again and wrap it around the base of my cone to begin my wind chime. So you want to make sure that it's sitting really snug and break it off where it meets the other side. So we want to slip and score the ends together. So I'm going to take my slip and a needle tool, and I'm going to score up the 2 ends of the clay. I'm going to take a little bit of slip, add it, and press and wiggle the 2 end pieces so that way they are attached. Now I'm ready to take my second coil and add it on top. What I want to do is I want to lay it out on top, again close to the cone. I don't want to be too far from the cone. I can break it off, break a little bit more off till the ends meet. Okay. Once I know it's going to fit, I want to pick it up. I want to lay it back down on the table, and I want to come back and score up the top of the previous coil that I put down. Because I need to attach the 2 coils to each other, or else they will come apart after the firing. Take some slip, put some slip on there. I also want to score the coil that's going to be going on top of the previous coil. I don't need to add slip to both pieces, I just need to add slip to one, but the score marks need to be on both pieces. So what I want to do, I want to take my coil and I want to lay the score marks down on top of the coil score marks on the cone already. Again, where the 2 pieces meet, I want to score, add a little bit of slip, press and wiggle the 2 ends together, and then I want to press and wiggle the coil on top of the previous coil. It's important that you press and wiggle all the way around to really make sure that the coil secures to the other one. Now you'll notice that I have lots of score marks showing on the coil that I put on first. We need to smooth all that out. We don't want to see it. So we can take a modeling tool, just like this one, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to gently smooth that coil out. Continue to add coils in any kind of design that you want your wind chime to have.